We are going to bring to you a Bills Hall of Famer who has been taking in practice the last day or so here and offering some pointers to some of the young pass rushers on this roster. It is Hall of Famer Bruce Smith on the line. Bruce, thanks for giving us some time. We know that Coach McDermott and the staff have kept you busy here.
Anything for you, Sevy. They told me you wanted me to be on the show, so we made it work. I've got my phone propped up on an ice bucket and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So,
Perfect.
so,
How long? Listen, I know you came in
so
town.
you can tell how important you are to me, Sevy.
I appreciate it. We know you've been in town. You came in town last week for Jim's charity golf event. You hung around. You hung out with the defensive line. You've been doing it for a couple of days. How long are you going to stay in town? And how is that going with the coaching aspect of it?
I am actually leaving today. I've been able to spend about 3 or 4 days with the guys, and man, I am thoroughly impressed. From obviously Leslie Frazier, who does an outstanding job with his attack style defense, to Eric Washington and his philosophy and how he communicates and coaches the defensive lineup. And they've got some young, talented players on this defensive line. I think it's really going to make an impact for this football team this upcoming year.
Yeah, I know, Bruce, that when Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham first got drafted, you reached out to them, gave them a call, welcomed them to Buffalo, etc. But now you've had a day or so just to be around them, see how they interact, see how much they put into practice or how seriously they take it. What are your initial impressions of their approach as young professionals?
My initial impression is these guys should be good for a very long time. You have to understand it's a process. I remember when I came here in 1985, I would pick up bits and pieces of information. We call them nuggets that will allow you to play faster, to read different keys about the offensive line, and as well as the play set. So all I'm doing is what Ben Williams did for me, is pass on valuable knowledge to these young men in hopes that it will soak in and they are able to translate that out on the field that allows them to be able to play faster.
How difficult is it? I mean, you obviously you had a bunch of physical gifts, and these guys also have physical gifts. Basham and Epineza, Jerry Hughes, and Rousseau. You go down the list. Everybody's got a different set of physical skills. How do you translate what you were able to do and your physical gifts onto somebody else who may have a different set of physical skills? Because Rousseau is so tall, he's got such length, and a guy like Jerry Hughes, who is shorter in stature and does it a different way. Are there basic things that apply to everybody, and then there are nuances that go with each of those different guys' gifts?
Yeah, it's pretty basic, and there's a universal a mindset and language that we use. And I even gave them an analogy. I told them that the common denominators that all great pass rushers have, along with defensive players, is their ability to be able to beat that lineman off of the snap, beat him out of his stance. That creates penetration. That's a deal killer for the offense. When you're playing on their side of the ball, when you're wrecking havoc in their backfield, that doesn't allow very many plays on the offense to be successful. Secondly, be deliberate and precise and violent with your hands. Remember, I just told you what Ben Williams told me. He said, if they can't grab you, they can't hold you. So you keep those two thought processes and keep it simple. It's not complicated. Leslie Frazier puts you in a position to succeed, to be able to attack. All you have to do is read your keys and go out and execute and play fast. When you take the thinking out of the game, you're able to play a lot faster and you can make more plays that way as opposed to sitting on the line of scrimmage, second guessing yourself, or taking false steps.
Bruce, having stood out there on the practice field with these guys, I probably don't need to tell you that the Bills made a point of investing in length. I mean, whether it was AJ in the draft last year, who's 6'6", or Greg Rousseau this year, who's 6'7" and change. And we've seen evidence of that playing into the pass rush's favor for Buffalo in these two preseason games because they've both won with inside stab moves, and their length is such that they don't even have to get clear past the offensive tackle to get a hand on the quarterback as long as he's in the pocket. Can you just speak to the advantages that those guys have with that length and where we should expect to see it surface the most?
Well, you can solve a lot of problems from a defensive team perspective as well as a team's perspective with a great pass rush. There is no substitute for being able to get to the quarterback with 4 rushers and sometimes 5. That gives Leslie Frazier an opportunity to use his whole play calls instead of a fraction of it. That's how critical the defensive line play is on a football team. The two most important positions on a football team is the quarterback and the pass rusher. And now that they've gone out and made some crucial investments in long, lengthy guys that can run and that has power, and there's still some room for growth. Once we turn them into students of the game, along with their athletic ability, this is going to be truly special. But I think they're going to be able to have an impact this year. And that's what we need the most, because this window of opportunity only lasts about 4 or 5 years. We need help right now, and it's critical to have it at the position of rushing the quarterback. We know how explosive the offensive unit is, but the missing point that we did not have was being able to put consistent pressure on the quarterback with just 4 rushers. I think this makes this team a lot more complete, and we're going to be able to compete. And it's going to take a lot of stress off of Leslie, and it will take some stress off of our defensive backs as well.
You've played defensive end in a 3-4. They're playing a 4-3 now. And also one of the philosophies that Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott have implemented, they rotate guys through to have fresh bodies. I know you played a ton of snaps and a high percentage of the snaps defensively for the Bills. And how important is it, and how much of a difference can it make for this team to continue to be able to do that? Like in the fourth quarter games when you've only played, the Bills players have played half the snaps of the offensive linemen. They don't rotate offensive linemen in very much. Those guys have played 4 quarters or 3.5 quarters of football. So late in the game, that rotation starts to pay dividends. How early in a game would that happen? And, are you a proponent of that, rotation kind of philosophy?
Well, I like having fresh guys that are able to come in and give that 100%. There's a lot of wear and tear when teams are passing the ball 16, 70 times a ball game. That takes a lot of energy out of it. And it's also mentally draining. So to be able to have a rotation where you can sub a whole set of defensive linemen and you don't miss a beat in terms of putting pressure on the quarterback, I think that just adds to the strength of the team as a whole. And not very many teams that have that capability. But I truly believe we've got that capability, and it's going to pay big dividends later in the season when guys are worn out, might have some injuries and so forth. But to win this league now, you've got to have 6 or 7 guys that can get after the quarterback.
Talking with Bill.
Hey guys, I got to get ready to get out to practice. If you got one more question, that would be cool.
That's right. I know your time's short. So here's the last one. We've been asking you what you thought of being out at practice. My question to you is, what were some of the most common questions you were getting from those young pass rushers while you were out there with them?
Well, they just wanted to pick my brain, and that's what was so enlightening to me. I one of the points that I made to them, and I talked about that common denominator about all great pass rushers and defensive players, is their ability to be able to beat that offensive lineman out of his stance. All the great ones have done it. Whether you're talking about this era or whether you're talking about the era that I played in or even the one before me, all the great ones have beat that offensive lineman out of his stance. So I gave them this kind of stat. I said, because our offense scored so many points, it put them in a passing situation early in the ball games. And I told them I could guarantee them at least one third of my 200 sacks came from me beating that offensive lineman out of the stance. It would almost look like I was offside sometimes, but I had certain keys that I was focused on that would give me that jump, that would leave that offensive lineman barely getting out of his stance, and I'd already taken a step and a half. So that's the one element that I've tried to preach to these guys. It is beating that offensive lineman out of his stance. If you beat him out of his stance, that's the quickest way to get to the quarterback.
Bruce, thanks, man. It's great seeing you, bud.
Good seeing you, Sebby. Talk to you soon.
See you, man.
Tell
You
Sarah
bet.
and the kids I said hi.
I will. I got you.
All right,
right,
that's Bills
take care.
Hall of Famer Bruce Smith joining us just before he heads out to the practice field for his second day of work with the Bills defensive lineman and defensive line coach Eric Washington.